One of my favourite cities in the UK is the city of York. As probably my congregation know, I often refer to it. We have used it as a stopover when on holidays, perhaps going down to the south of England, or indeed just pausing there for a week, because I've always found there's a lot to do which interests me and the rest of the house. York City stretches back into the mists of time, and from Old English period, then with the Vikings, and you can still see situations relating to that period today through the clever development of archaeology, etc. So you can, as we say, go back in time almost through many events within York City. So moving from Vikings, you're into a medieval era. And perhaps if you've been in York, you will have gone down some of the old medieval streets still kept, such as the Shambles. But towering over York City, and indeed a landmark that catches your eye even before you reach the city itself, is the Minster. A massive cathedral which began to be built in the 1200s. It took over 200 years. Not completed until into the 1400s. One of the most important Gothic cathedrals within Western Europe. No doubt you have seen pictures of it. I have an old print taking us back over the years, which possibly may be seen if I just do that for you. And as you look at York Minster, you see how impressive the building was and indeed still is. I mention this because we happened to be in York in July 1984. And when we arrived into the city, it was quite an unusual and sad situation, because a night or two before, the Minster had caught fire and one of the wings was set ablaze. Being there on a morning, just a day or so afterwards, the stench of smoke tended to cover the whole city. And sadly, you looked at a masterpiece building having experienced the ravages of fire. When I came to my own congregation, I was given a photograph of that actual fire. Someone from Second Comber had been there in 1984 before I was on the scene or thought about for Comber. And in our conversations, they gave me this photograph. And there it is on the actual day of the blaze. And you can see how the fire has caught here on one wing. And the devastation, particularly up around here, was quite tremendous. Almost a little bit like the Windsor Castle fire that the Queen faced. So when you saw it, how could that ever be rebuilt? But having been in York many times since, after several years, everything was put together. And that which seemed irreparable was one that has now been put into order. And you wouldn't have known anything had happened. Restored to its former glory out of the ashes. In the prophecy of Ezekiel, an Old Testament book, a prophet, a man sent from God, a man who brought a word from God to the people of Israel, but also could look ahead and be given an image or a picture of events for the future, gives us an unusual picture of desolation. Not a fire, but a picture which suggests everything has been ruined. It was the image of a valley with bones lying in it, a valley of dry bones. The impression of war and violence, and everything had been lost for Israel. How could she find her homeland? How could things be restored? It seems a bizarre image to us, but nevertheless, it was that message that Ezekiel received, and it brought a clarity to his mind and to others as to what God could do when everything seemed destroyed. And we read in that book in the Bible that the breath of God passed over the valley of dry bones, and they came to life, sinew by sinew. And that which seemed impossible was transformed because of the breath of God. In our lives, we perhaps meet things that seem impossible to sort out. Or indeed in our community at the moment with the pandemic, everything has been changed. And sometimes people in the media will say, it'll never be the same as it was. But for those who would look to God, there is always a new beginning and a new hope. And the breath of God means the Spirit of God. And when we look to God and ask for his Spirit to breathe upon us, he can bring us into a new situation. When everything seemed impossible, there were new possibilities from God. And when we bring our own nation and we bring our own situation before God, we do want a vaccine. We do want help, but maybe there's a challenge to ask us to pause the button in life and say, should we also be looking to God? Realize that there is one greater than us and one who can breathe upon us and change everything. It doesn't mean there won't be pain and loss. Of course there will. Ezekiel found that. But the situation could be transformed. And in Jesus Christ, we see something which was beyond our imagination. When Jesus died, and everyone said, that's the end. Nothing can come out of that. But in the crucifixion, a few days later, there was a resurrection, transforming death and transforming life and offering something that was of a new beginning for the whole world and for the future, pointing to a day when there will be a new heaven and a new earth, according to the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation. And in that new heaven and new earth, we will see that the past will have disappeared and the new will have begun. So facing tomorrow, who knows what happens, indeed, maybe facing today. But let's look to God and through his Son, Jesus Christ, find a new breath of the Spirit of God available to us individually and always open to us as a people. My hometown is Lisburn. Oh, for generations, I suppose, our family have lived outside the town a mile or two, certainly away back to at least 1840. When I retire from my own work here, I'll be going back towards my own home. So Lisburn is a place we have known, a time when there were individual shopkeepers, and we knew them. This town where I went to school. I want you to look at the coat of arms, for want of a word, the symbol for Lisburn. And when you look at it now, try and identify some things, because maybe we need to concentrate always on a symbol like a coat of arms for a moment or two, just to get our eyes accustomed to the artwork. Mightn't always immediately catch our attention regarding the detail. You will see in that coat of arms a lily, and the lily represented the Huguenots, French Protestants who had to flee from France, and they made quite an impact on that area of Lisburn. The impact they made was on the linen business. And so if you look at the coat of arms of Lisburn, you will also see a symbol of flax. On each side of the shield, there is another symbol, two phoenix. The reason being, Lisburn was originally, it is reckoned, known as Lisnagarda. And then the term Lisburn later attached. It went through at least, we think, two fires. One in the 17th century and then one in the early 18th century. I think the dates may be around 1707. You can imagine many wooden buildings, and the result was destruction. A bit like York Minster. And how could that ever be rebuilt? After one fire, but then a second one. But it was. And over the years, it became a thriving market town for that locality. But look at the inscription at the bottom. It symbolizes, or rather, it refers to the symbol of the phoenix. The phoenix coming out of the fire. And translated, the motto is, I will arise from the flame. That in a place of destruction, there'll be a new beginning. And that the symbol of the phoenix rising out of the flame captures that hope. I will arise from that flame. So may we in our own journey of life find that through God, there is a hope, symbolized clearly by the different vision of the Valley of Bones, but pointing to that truth, that no matter how things seem difficult, there's a new beginning in and through Jesus Christ, as the breath of God can blow upon us.